Let me tell you about my first date. So this is June of last year. I meet this girl from my sister's volleyball team. Up to this point, I had never really had a girl into me before. Maybe like slight things before this, but nothing ever like this serious where I've actually spoken to this girl and we actually like each other. And up to that point in my life, I had never really spoken to girls. I didn't really do cold approach before that. I had never really spoken to girls in my life. And so you can imagine the nerves that I had going into this. And the funniest thing too is we rescheduled the date over the course of like 3 or 4 weeks. So we had scheduled the date originally in like May, but then she was busy that week and had to reschedule. And then the same thing happens the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week, until we finally get to do this. And my dumb ass is like, note, I've never really like interacted with girls well before in my life, like in person. And so my dumb ass is using all this like text game and all this shit. And I mean, I've escalated to the point where like I should kiss this girl on this date. And do you know what my inexperienced self, do you know what I choose? The date that I choose to go on with this girl, to go see a movie. What do girls want you to do with them when you go to see a movie? They want you to make out with them, right? My dumb, inexperienced ass chooses a movie as the first date. And so you can imagine over the course of these 3 weeks, I have all of this tense energy just built up in my mind. Not necessarily a shitload of negative thoughts up until about the day of the date, but just all of this expectation of myself to perform and all of these expectations of how the date is going to go. And so eventually the day of the date comes and my mind just goes rapid fire with the negative and anxious thoughts. I'm coming up with all these scenarios in my head about all the possible things I could mess up. What if I say a weird thing? What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't perform well? What if I'm too nervous? What if I mess up being physical with her? I have all these expectations for myself set extremely high, and I'm creating all of these negative situations in my head of things that could go wrong, to the point where I'm literally setting my subconscious to seek out these negative situations as the goal. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second because that's actually very, very important. But I'm doing my hair, getting my clothes on, getting my cologne and deodorant on, and my mind is going rampant with negative thoughts. I go and I get in my brother's truck to drive to the theater because I don't have a car, so just drive my brother's truck. And as I'm driving there, I'm trying to do every kind of positive thinking I can. I'm trying to like hype myself up. I turn on some music to try to hype myself up. I'm a metalhead. Heavy metal is just my thing. That's what I was raised on. Like, Dad, if you're watching this video, thank you for heavy metal because it's fantastic. So I turn on some heavy metal, like the type of shit that I'd hype myself up in the gym with, right? This is like the music that like gets me going, right? I'm trying to listen to that, and it's just not working. Nothing I tell myself, no song I play that could hype me up does anything for me. And the negative thoughts grow worse and worse. I'm over analyzing every little thing to the point where I'm trying to think about which direction I should take to get to the theater that is going to like inspire my brain the most. So I go to so there's the highway, but you can get off the highway and take like a back road to get there, right? So I get off the highway with the thought that like, if I take the back road, I'll just be a little bit more inspired to do the date for some reason. So I get off the highway, but then as I get off the highway, I decide in my mind, no, I need to stay the course and stay on the highway, and then I'll be more inspired for the date. So I get back on the highway. So I get off and then get back on. As like, what you sitting there thinking about that is like, what difference does the road that you take make? And I'm thinking that too now, but at the time it was so just over analyzing everything in my head to where this mattered to me for some reason. So it's like I get off the highway and then I get back on the highway. It's like, you just stay on the highway, dickhead. Bro, it doesn't have anything to do with the date. So eventually I get to the theater and I pull into the parking lot. When I park, I text the girl. I'm like, hey, are you here yet? She's like, yeah, I'm inside. The movie's already starting. I'm actually late to this date too. Another funny thing I just remembered is that I was like 10 or 15 minutes late to the date. So the movie starts at like maybe 5 o'clock. The movie starts and I get there at like 5:10, 5:15. And then guess what I do? I'm there parked. I've just texted her. And I literally sit there for like 5 minutes. And I have the thought in my head that I'm not going to go into the theater and that I'm just going to no-show the date. Because I have this horrible, sick feeling in my stomach. And the thought keeps coming to me that you can't do this. You're not supposed to be here. This is not supposed to be happening. And so I just sit in my car for like 5 minutes with the thought that I'm literally not going to go into the date. Eventually I come around and I force my hand to open the door. I force my legs to get out of the car and I force myself to walk inside. And it's like hard for me to even walk inside. Like I'm trying to tell, like I'm really having to force myself to walk in. I know that might sound like an over exaggeration. I'm just like trying to build up the story that I'm telling you, but it's not. It was literally a struggle for me to walk inside. I had to force my feet. It's almost though like my feet were trying to run the other way, but then I was having to literally force them down and forward with each step. And so I get into the theater, whatever. I'm sure you can probably guess how the rest of the date went with all of this negative and anxious and overthinking energy that I had built up. I barely spoke to this girl for all the 2 or 3 hours that we were on this date for. And like in my mind, I'm like, just sit there and just pretend you're invested in the movie. I'm just really invested in the movie. I'm just watching it. I'm just really invested in it. Barely spoke to her. Did maybe a couple flirty things where I think I threw popcorn at her and was like trying to mess with her or something. That thought that I had in the car that I can't do this, that I shouldn't be here, that this shouldn't be happening is running rampant in my mind, and I just can't do anything. I'm done. I'm completely cooked. I'm already too deep into the anxiety and the overthinking and the overanalyzing to where there's no going back. I'm at the point of no return and the date is ruined. I'm here to help you stop doing that and be able to actually go to the events and do what you're there to do in the first place, which is to have fun. You never wanted to go to social events so you could sit there and think about how to perform. You just want to be able to go and loosen up and enjoy yourself, right? But it seems impossible to do that a lot of the time because of the anxious and the negative and the overthinking thoughts. Let's fast forward to this year where I actually went on 2 very successful dates and I actually got my first girlfriend from the first date. So once again, girl from my sister's volleyball team, actually my sister's best friend. Yeah, you can turn to me in the comments for that one. That's fine. We did break up just not too long ago, actually. So, you can roast me in the comments if you want to. I end up asking this girl out after some time, and we plan to go and get Chick-fil-A and then go and do mini golf. We don't end up mini golfing, but regardless. This date went wonderfully. I didn't have anxious thoughts in my head before it. I didn't have negative thoughts. I didn't have overthinking thoughts. I actually thought very, very positively of it and could only really think about how well it was going to go, how attractive I was going to be, how much she was going to be into me. Part of that is because of my experience from last year to this year. It's about a year apart, and I built up a bit of experience with women, just cold approaching them. Went on another date last year. So part of it is the fact that I built up experience, but the bigger part of it is the mental shift that I made for this date versus the one last year. And it makes a massive, massive difference. If you practice this, it's going to make a huge difference and you're going to have incredible social interactions and you can stop all of this garbage, overanalyzing and all of this bullshit. You can stop being socially anxious if you do this. And so I go into this date, it goes extremely well. Obviously, me and this girl end up together. We end up dating. She ends up being my girlfriend. And so you might question, what changed between the first date and the second date? What did I do differently to get such a vastly different result? And again, you can sit there and think that like part of it is my experience of like, oh, he's just more experienced. Like he just went and got experience with more girls. And it's like partly yes. But again, the bigger part of this is the mental shift that I made. The mental shift that I made The first thing is that I didn't expect anything of myself. With the first date, I had all these weeks and all this time to ruminate and create these fantasies and create these negative thoughts in my head and build up this expectation of performance for myself to live up to. But with the second date, I removed any expectation of anything to do. I didn't create these fantasies in my head. I didn't create these negative situations that I thought I might have to overcome. And so instead of the bar being way up here, that I need to live up to this and do this great performance, the bar doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe that's incorrect to say. The bar is just down here. The bar of success is now, how much fun did I have? And I'll tell you, that will make a massive difference in your social interactions. If you set the bar, instead of needing to perform, you set it to how much fun you have, and now it's measured by how much fun you have. Now you lift this burden from your shoulders of this need to impress people and seem as somebody different than you actually are. And you give yourself the ability to actually loosen up and enjoy yourself. And so I set the bar to how much fun am I going to have on this date. The next thing that I did was I switched the kind of visualizations I did. What you visualize is what happens. You actually visualize things all the time without even knowing it. I was visualizing in the first date without even knowing it. And I was wiring my subconscious to, in the present moment, get a certain result. So in your subconscious is what's called the creative mechanism. And what this does is it helps you act creatively and spontaneously in the present moment to achieve a certain goal that you set yourself up in your mind. And the reason that whatever you visualize comes to be is that whatever you visualize is what you wire your subconscious mind to achieve. So for the first date, what I was doing is I was visualizing all of these negative things. And what that did was wire my subconscious brain to directly seek out those negative results. The way visualization works in a step-by-step process is that you create a sentence in your head. So for my date, I created the sentence in my head that I'm going to be awkward and unattractive and weird. Then you create an image to go with that. So I actually create an image in my mind of what it will look like for me to be weird and awkward. And then the third thing that you do is that you attach an emotion to this image. So you directly attach what emotion is going to come about as a result of being weird and awkward. So I did this for the first date a whole bunch without knowing it consciously, obviously. But I did this a whole bunch, and you actually do this a whole bunch too before you go into a social situation, whether it's a date or meeting new people, whatever it might be. You're sitting there visualizing about that. You're sitting there creating a sentence in your head about how you're going to act. Then you create an image to go with that, and then you attach an emotion to go with that as well. And then think about every time that you go into a social situation and you think negatively about it before you go into it. How do you end up acting at the social situation? Negatively. So the mental shift you have to make is to give yourself visualization, but do it in a positive way instead. It's very hard to not think about a date, for example. It's very hard to not think about a date before you go to it, right? People will tell you don't think about it, man. Just go and have fun and don't think about it before. But it's like the white elephant analogy, right? If you tell someone not to think about a white elephant, what do they think about? A white elephant, because they're like, don't think about it. Oh, there it is, right? So the same goes for the date. If you tell me not to think about the date, my mind goes to the date all the more, and it just thinks about more negative things. So instead of removing the thought about the date entirely or trying to do that, simply think positively about the date instead, because you're going to think about it anyways. So why not just think about it positively instead of negatively, right? So we're very good at this point. You and I, we're very, very good at, maybe you more so than me, but up to this point, you are very, very skilled at negative visualizations, because you do them all the time. And so they just come very, very naturally to you. Creating that sentence, that image, and that emotion, that all comes very, very naturally to you in a very subconscious process. You don't have to consciously think about doing that. It just kind of comes naturally. And the reason is because you've practiced it so often. The good news is that we can actually learn to do it positively and then have positive visualizations come automatically to us. This is what I have now after enough time of practicing it. It's not perfect yet, but I'm actually starting to get positive visualizations automatically instead of negative ones. Like, think about how nice that would be. Going into a date, instead of thinking automatically about negative things, you automatically think about positive things about the date. That's what I have now. And again, it's not perfect, but I get that a lot more now than I did before. And it makes such a big difference in my performance in the social situation. So what you need to do is train yourself to do positive visualization instead of negative visualization. So let's say you're about to go on a date and you start to think negatively about it. In the moment that you're thinking negatively about it, you have to catch yourself and then directly start to do a positive one instead of a negative one. So you're sitting there and you start to get a negative visualization in your head. You have to stop yourself. Now you need to create a positive sentence. So if you're going into a date, tell yourself, maybe you create the sentence, I'm going to be very attractive and charismatic and confident. Now you need to create an image in your head of what that will look like on the date. And that doesn't have to line up perfectly with reality. The biggest point here is the emotion that you attach to the image. You have to create an emotion to go with the image. That is the emotion you would feel at the time if you were being very attractive and charismatic and confident. So you think of an image of you like telling a joke or something like that, and she's sitting there really enjoying your presence and blushing and smiling and laughing, right? But now you need to create an emotion to go with that. So at that time, if that was happening, if you were truly being confident and charismatic around this girl and she was enjoying your presence, what would that feel like in the moment? You need to create that emotion to go with the image, because the emotion is the most important thing. Most often, in fact, 99% of the time, the image you create in your head will not be exactly what happens in real life. The surroundings will be different. The way you guys will be sitting will be different. What she'll be wearing and what you'll be wearing, they'll be different, right? But the emotion that you get will be the same. The important thing is that that emotion wires your subconscious creative mechanism to directly seek out those positive results. And so if you do a positive visualization or a negative one, the natural intuitions you will get in the present moment on the date will be there so that you can get the negative or positive result that you visualized. So for my date, for example, I negatively visualized before the date. And so all of the natural intuitions of things to do in my brain on the date that I got were there so that I could get the negative result that I visualized. So you have to switch this around and do it in a positive way instead. So that in the present moment on the date, all of the jokes and the questions that you think to say, all of the little flirty and teasy things that you think about doing, those will be there to get you the positive results that you visualized. If this seems like a little bit too good to be true, I promise you it's absolutely life-changing. Don't write this off before you try it for yourself, because you're going to be missing out on a life-changing hack. The other thing too is that you actually do want to take your mind off of the date or the whatever thing you're going to. You do want to take your mind off of it before going to it. I know before I said that it's very hard to take your mind off of it, and if you tell yourself to take your mind off of it, you end up thinking about it more, right? When you do think about it, if you catch yourself thinking negatively about it, change it to positive. But for the most part, remove it from your mind and understand that it is to your benefit to not think about it, and it is to your detriment to think about it. If you sit there and think about it and you're trying to think through how you're going to act, what you do is you jam your subconscious creative mechanism, because you're trying to do consciously what is already being done subconsciously. The subconscious is taking in thousands of details and making all these tiny calculations all of the time to the point where it actually understands your surroundings better than you do. And so if you try to start doing that consciously, you jam your subconscious's ability to do this well and to give you intuitions about how to act well. Does that make sense? So if you think a whole bunch before the date, and then when you're actually at the date about how to act, you jam your subconscious ability to just say the charming and the funny things that you naturally would. If you let go of control, give no thought about how to act, and just allow yourself to do the natural intuitions that come to mind, you can act creatively and spontaneously and be yourself. Think about it this way. When you drive a car, do you consciously consider how you're going to drive the car before driving it? Do you overanalyze and come up with all these like weird situations of like, what am I going to do if that guy cuts me off or that person runs a red light? No. You just get in the car and drive the car when the time comes to do that. You're not sitting there thinking through all these scenarios about driving before you drive. You just drive. And it's like when you actually get in the car to drive, it's all a subconscious process. You don't have to consciously think about it almost at all. 5% of it might be conscious. The other 95% of driving is completely subconscious. You don't have to consciously think about how much pressure to put on the gas and the brake, or how much energy is needed to move the wheel, how much rotation you need, or how to look at your mirrors or whatever. All of that is happening subconsciously, to the point where I'm not encouraging you to text while driving, but you can sit there and like text for like 3 seconds and still stay on the road. That is how much of a subconscious process driving is. Now think about if you tried to consciously drive. You'd start to mess up and be so weird, because you'd be thinking about, all of a sudden, you'd start to overthink about like, oh, how much pressure do I need to put on the brake, or how I need to turn like this, and you end up like being all, what's the word? You end up being all sporadic and going all over the road and braking and going really weird. If you've never tried to like consciously think about what you're doing when you're driving, try that and tell me how that goes for you. It's horrible. You don't just like allow your mind and your body to drive for you. You end up trying to do it yourself and end up messing it up. It's exactly the same for social situations. Allow your mind and your body to do it all for you. Don't do this whole conscious overanalyzing bullshit. Positively visualize about the date or whatever before you go to it. And then when you're there, whatever natural intuitions you get about how to act or what to say, do it on the spot without any second thought. Whatever question you think to ask to that girl, whatever kind of flirty physical thing you do, you think to do to her, like you maybe you think about like to like play fight her or whatever, do that immediately. Because those are the natural intuitions that are coming from your subconscious to help you get the positive results that you visualized before. People talk about how to overcome small talk. I see all of this content online about it. Oh, do this to never run out of things to say. The real way to never run out of things to say is to literally say whatever comes to your mind. You literally just say whatever pops into your brain. And that's how you do small talk really well. I was at Lululemon with my sisters the other day, and I'm sitting there. There's a little bit of an awkward silence between us and the two cashiers. So what I was thinking about at that time was I saw that they were wearing the Lululemon fanny pack, or the Lululemon carry bags that everybody wears, right? Those red ones. I think you know what I'm talking about. I saw that they were wearing those, and I was thinking in my brain, do they wear those for their uniform, or do they actually own them? Do they wear them themselves or whatever? So I just said that. I got the natural intuition to ask them that question, and then I did. And we actually had a great conversation. And then my sisters later on complimented me, and they were like, you're very, very good at breaking awkward silence. You're just very, very natural. And that is the key to natural behavior and skill. It's to do and say whatever comes to your mind. Just trust yourself a little bit more. Trust that your subconscious is giving you intuitions that are going to give you a positive result. And if you positively visualize before, you're going to get even more of those. I hope that this video was as valuable to you as all this information has been to me in my life. If you think some more personal one-on-one help with your social anxiety and social skills would be very helpful, like you want somebody to kind of hold your hand and guide you through a very structured system to get you out of social anxiety and get you the vibrant social life that you want, I offer one-on-one personal social skills coaching. If that sounds interesting to you, give me a direct message on Instagram. Just direct message me the term social skills, and we'll speak more about some one-on-one coaching for you. Click and watch this video right now. Shut out the noise. Do the work. Mwah.